Hey guys, I'm Becky from Bookmarks Reviews, and welcome to my March wrap-up. March was the best month because not only was it my birth month, which my birthday just passed, it was on the 30th, but I also finally finished my TBR. So this month I had 7 books on my TBR and I managed to read all of those plus some, so I ended up reading 13 books this month. Of those 13 books, I had 1 that was a DNF, 1 that was a 3-star, 5 4-stars, and 6 5-stars. I will be going through these from the least amount of stars to the most amount of stars, so let's go ahead and get started. The lowest rated book was the one that I DNF'd, and I ended up not giving this any stars at all. When I DNF a book, it kind of just depends on why I DNF'd it. If it had things that made me angry and it was a bad book, then I will give it a rating. But if it's just not my taste, or I wasn't in the mood for it, or for whatever reason it wasn't necessarily the book but maybe me, then I don't give it any ratings because I feel like that's not fair. So the one and only DNF this month was Bite Me by Louise Cypress, and this one was sent to me for review on audio. I do feel that I may have ended up liking this more if I would have physically read it instead of listening to it, because I think one of my biggest problems with this book was the male narrator. The female narrator was pretty good. I just really struggled with the male narrator. He sounded very cocky. He sounded much older than the teenager that he was portraying. And I feel like a lot of the times when he would read something, it was like he didn't read it ahead of time and didn't really know what kind of inflection to put into his voice. So I just had so many problems listening to it because I could not connect with that male narrator. Another thing that I did not really like was that it had alternating points of view, which I absolutely love. But when the female would talk in the male chapters or vice versa, they would not introduce that other narrator. So even though we do have a female narrator for the female chapters, if the male was talking, the male narrator would not pop up. It would be the female changing her voice to be a male. So it kind of had this disconjointed flow because we had 2 voices for every character basically, and it just didn't really sit well with me. I really wish that the female would have done all female voices and the male do all male voices. It just would have worked out a lot better, I think. And yeah, my main dislike was the narrator, specifically the male narrator voice, but there were some problems with the context of the book. It just didn't feel like a today feminist read, so I just really wasn't loving it. I think I would have liked it a lot more and probably finished it if I would have read it physically, but that male narrator just really ruined it for me. I should probably also tell you guys what this book was about. So this was a vampire YA paranormal, and it has been quite a while since I read one, so I was already a little nervous going into it. But basically this girl gets bitten and it turns into a vampire, but she does not know it yet, and she just is getting ill and having these weird cravings, and she doesn't understand what's going on with her. The male point of view is a male who is a vampire bounty hunter, so he gets close to her in order to find out whether or not she is a good or a bad vampire, because good vampires are allowed to be around those who do not drink human blood, but he has to get closer to find out. She just thinks that this is a cute boy who wants her attention, and she does not yet know that she is a vampire. So it had a pretty good premise. I was a little nervous because it's been a while since I've read a vampire YA romance paranormal, but I was excited for it. But a darn male narrator. My 3-star book was Mera, Tidebreaker by Danielle Paige. This one is a YA graphic novel that follows Mera from Aquaman, and that's kind of like all that I even knew going into it, and all I can kind of say after I have read it. I have not watched Aquaman, so if you have, you probably know a bit more about the characters, I assume, but I have just been getting into graphic novels, and when I saw this on Edelweiss, I went ahead and requested it for review, and I was approved. So yesterday and today is when I spent reading it. It is pretty short. I think it's like 180 pages, and I did really enjoy the artwork for it. The storyline was okay. The reason I'm giving it 3 stars is because I felt like there were a whole lot of opportunities for conflict and for some angst, but every problem that gets brought up is very quickly and easily resolved. Like, everyone is just way too level-headed in this book. So I ended up giving it 3 stars just because I felt like it wasn't extremely realistic. Like, I felt like everything was just like automatically fixed. Like, a problem would be brought up and there'd be a little bit of tension and then it would be fixed, and then another problem brought up and the same thing. So that happened throughout the entire book from page 1 till the very end. Everyone is just extremely rational and level-headed, and even problems like war between two, I don't know if it's species or if it's just cultures, I guess. A war between 2 cultures is like very easily like, we'll deal with this later, let's do peace talks kind of thing. So I don't know, it was interesting, and I read the entire thing, but I just felt like I wasn't fully fulfilled. It didn't leave any room, kind of. Like, this could be a one and done, and I would be okay with that. If it didn't go on anymore, I would be fine, and it might be like that just to give you some backstory on Mera. I don't know. So, yeah, it just felt like a 3-star. I liked it, but there were a lot of things I didn't, so it's a very easy 3-star for me. And now let's get into my 4-star read. So the very first one is Every Heart a Doorway by Seanana McGuire. This one is an adult, I guess, paranormal fantasy kind of thing. This book is about a home for wayward children. So it is these children who have magically found a door to a world where they truly belong, and for whatever reason they have been sent back, and they now basically have PTSD with dealing with their original world. They can't go back to their world for whatever reason, and they're just having a very hard time dealing with that because they do not feel that they belong in their original world anymore, and they want to go back, so there's just constant struggle. So I was a tad confused, and so was the adult librarian at the library that I work at, on why this was an adult book and not a YA, since it deals with teenagers. But then you read it and you realize that it's dealing with some very dark, very brutal, very graphic stuff happening throughout the entire book. This one is like maybe 200 and some pages, if that. It's like 170 pages, and a lot happens in this very short book, a lot of gruesome stuff. And when I realized that our library did not have these books, and they've been pretty popular lately, which is why I decided to pick it up, I requested that our adult librarian purchase them, and she did come up to me and said, I bought them, but they really should have been taken out of the youth budget because these are teen books. And I was like, no, they're not. I read the first one. Trust me, these are adult books. So I really enjoyed my time with this one. I'm definitely going to be continuing on with the series. It is, like I said, very dark and brutal, and I loved it. And I cannot wait to learn more about these kids, and it was just really, really fantastic. I feel like I have like a loss for words when it comes to this book because it is so short but so much happens, and I didn't feel cheated in any way by how short this was or how quickly things wrapped up. I felt like it did a really good job with the time that we are given. It could definitely have been longer, and I would be happy with that. But I kind of appreciate this short series vibe it has going for it, and I'm definitely enjoying it. I cannot wait to continue on. The next one is the pick that I had for the Rub Club this month, and that is Deep Dark Blue by Polo Tate. This one is a YA memoir by and about Polo Tate. She always had the dream of going into the Air Force, and so she ends up going to this military college to prepare to go into the Air Force, and the entire memoir is about the physical, emotional, and sexual abuse that she encountered while at this military college. Having the courage to speak up and put this out there is just outstanding. I want to say that she is brave for going out there and telling her truth, but honestly that's not a word that we should have to use these days. You should have no qualms when it comes to speaking up and saying that something wrong has happened to you and that it's not okay. That shouldn't even be something that you even have to think about. But unfortunately, it still is something that we kind of have to think about. And I will say that I do give her super mad props for writing it down into a book. I think it's one thing to stand up and say something's wrong and tell somebody and do something about it. It's a whole nother thing to put your entire truth in a book for people to read and judge you. And for that, I would definitely say that she is very brave. Obviously, from the subject matter, this book is not a very light and fluffy book, obviously, but I did really enjoy it. One thing that I really liked was that you couldn't tell who the person that was going to do these things to her was until it finally happened, because she did such an amazing job at writing it without bias. I feel like I never got the notion of, oh, it's probably going to be that person because of the way that she's describing them. She doesn't judge that person until it happens. So there's never a point where she kind of hints of who that person was because they were friends. I feel like it would be extremely hard to write it where you put them in a good light in the beginning. So I think as a writer, she is really amazing, because I didn't know who the person was going to be that does these terrible things to her until it finally happens, because at no point did she say any even like small little diss about the person until after the fact. Like, she really kept her feelings separate of, this is how I felt about them in the beginning and this is the person that they are now. There were even signs in the beginning that I kind of caught on to and was like, I wonder if this is the person that's going to do this to her, because there were some warning signs, and she also does an amazing job at talking about that as well. Like, there were signs that she should have caught on to, but you don't think about those kinds of things because this shouldn't happen to anybody. I just felt like this was just written so very well. I wish all the best for Polo Tate. Like, she seriously deserves it, and I'm just so happy and honored that I got the chance to read her story, because more of these stories should be out there to say that you're not alone, but also to say this isn't okay and you need to say something and it shouldn't be happening and it needs to stop. One really cool thing about this is that Polo herself actually is the narrator for the audio, so that was a really cool experience as well. I kind of expected it to be a lot more emotional than it was. Because she's the narrator, I kind of expected there to be times where she may have broke down, but she was seriously such a trooper throughout the entire story, and it was just done so very well. It was still definitely very emotional for the reader, but I just think that she handled herself with such dignity and grace throughout this entire book. Next is Not If I Save You First by Allie Carter. This one is a YA thriller about a girl whose father was the head of Secret Service for the President of the United States, and a boy who is the son of the President of the United States. Ever since they were little, they have been best friends, but then something happens, and the main character and her father, they go and live in the middle of nowhere in Alaska, and she has not talked to the boy since. So now it is years later, they are teenagers, and the boy has gotten into trouble and he needs to come and stay with them. His father wants him to learn responsibility, so he comes to stay with the girl and her father. Unfortunately, he ends up getting kidnapped, and it's up to the girl to fight through the Alaskan wilderness, find him, and save him. Now, I really love this book. This is not a typical book that I would normally pick for myself. I randomly picked it one day at work to listen to on audio, and it was just complete impulse and a mood pick. So I normally would not pick this book out like for a TBR, but I'm very happy that I did, because I definitely want to try out some more of Allie Carter. Her writing was really amazing, and I just absolutely loved how much of a feminist read this was, because it is the guy who is the damsel in distress, and it's the woman that has to go and save him. And one thing that I just really loved about this was, even though it is the female who has to go and save the guy, she is still very feminine. I feel like a lot of times when we have characters like this, they are a little bit more manly. She still had those feminine qualities, but was still just a so total badass. And I just really enjoyed this book. Next up is book 1 in the Mortal Instruments series, which is City of Bones by Cassandra Clare. This one, have watched the movie and I've watched the TV show. I'm very far behind, but I have watched some of the TV show. So I did start this book after watching the movie. I got about halfway through and then I never went back, and I finally recently decided to go ahead and finish it, which I did have to start from the very beginning so I wouldn't be lost. But I don't want to say anything in case someone has not read this or has not watched the movie or for whatever reason does not know anything about it. I don't want to spoil it, but something happens with the romance. We find out something and I'm just not okay with that, which is not why it got 4 stars. It got 4 stars just because I did already know what was going to happen at the end. So this book didn't wow me. I think maybe if I would have read the book first, it probably would have, because I absolutely loved the movie. But reading it, I was just like, okay. I will also say, I think in the movie I liked Simon more, but in the books I really don't like Simon. Like, he's kind of whiny and very needy, and I just do not like Simon. But I am going to read at least book 2 before deciding whether or not I would like to continue on with the series, because I already knew everything that was going to happen with this one. So I want to read book 2. I have heard that the thing that happens at the end, it gets resolved. I told you guys to spoil me about it in my reading vlogs and things, so someone did spoil me, thankfully. It gets resolved, so I will at least read book 2 and then we'll see from there how I want to go. But yeah, a 4-star book for now. We'll see how book 2 does whenever I finally get around to reading that one. Next up, I read A Little Something Different by Sandy Hall, and this book really was a little something different. It is told in 14 different points of view, none of which are the 2 main characters that the book is about. So our 2 main characters are Leah and Gabe, and everyone feels that they should be together, that they are perfect for each other, but they, due to a bunch of different reasons, have not gotten together. It's always like a missed connection. So we hear from 14 different people and objects and animals, since one is a park bench and one is a squirrel, in their lives that talk about their connection, and we get to see different moments between them because we have the conversations where somebody overhears, or we have the conversations that they talk with their friends after the fact. So it really was very different. I personally love alternating points of view, and I was very excited when this book came out because I have never read something like this where we're getting a lot of points of view, and I definitely haven't heard of anything where the main characters are not even the points of view that we even hear from. Again, this book didn't overwhelm me with emotions. I definitely really enjoyed the read. It was very cute. It had super funny parts, and overall I did really enjoy it, but I didn't just absolutely die of love for it. So it is a 4-star read. And now let's move on to the 5-star reads. So my very first one was Amulet Volume 2 by Kazu Kibuishi. I am just really enjoying this graphic novel series. It is a juvenile graphic novel, and I am just loving it. It is so dark and so interesting for being a juvenile one. It definitely deals with characters who are, I believe, like somewhere between 9 and 12. So I understand why it falls into the juvenile category, but it deals with some dark topics, and I definitely wouldn't say that it is not appropriate for that age range. It just surprised me that we are talking about these topics, which the ones that it does deal with, I mean, kids these days do deal with these kinds of things like loss. So it's totally appropriate. It just kind of took me by surprise, but I absolutely love the art style. I will say that if you are a little unsure about this series, book 2 is a pretty good place where you can figure out if you want to continue on. It ends in a way where you would be okay if you never finish the series. I personally am definitely going to be going on. I am loving this. And yeah, it's really good. I'm so happy that I found it. Fun fact, when I was adding the next Harry Potter book onto my currently reading, I realized that Kazu Kibuishi is the one that does the artwork for my paperbacks, which is the ones that have the Hogwarts castle on the spines. And it's so funny because I absolutely love those covers. I think that they're just so beautiful. It's so funny that I never put two and two together because I knew who the illustrator of those covers were, but I never realized like how many Kazu Kibuishis do you really think are out in the world. So it's no wonder why I love the artwork so very much, because I absolutely love those covers. Next up is To Catch a Killer by Sheryl Scarborough. This one was my husband's pick for this month, and finally he picked out a 5-star read. Honestly, this book deserves more than 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. One thing that Sheryl does just amazingly is she's able to balance the light and dark that happens in our main character's life. So she is a normal teenager and deals with normal things like crushes and best friends and little fights between your friends of, you know, picking a guy over them and trying to juggle that stuff. So all of that stuff is still in here. It is still a coming of age novel, but at the same time, her mother was brutally murdered when she was a toddler, and that murderer has come back and she's trying to catch him. So Sheryl just did an amazing job with balancing the light and dark of this novel. I absolutely loved it. I could not put it down. I thought that this was a standalone. It turns out that there is at least one other book in the series, so I'm very excited to finally pick that up. I don't know exactly when I'm going to pick it up, but I cannot wait. The way that this book ends, it could have been a standalone, but it definitely leaves questions and other things about other characters left unsaid, which would suck if this was a standalone, but I'm so happy to find out that it is not, and I cannot wait to go on. This was just so very good, and I just absolutely loved it. This is everything that I love about dark YA. Next is First and Then by Emma Mills. I picked this one up because I wanted a YA romance to finally fulfill my need of having a really good romance in a book. All of the books I picked out lately, they have a spark of romance, but really they deal with more of the plot line of the book instead of the romance, and I wanted something that would focus on romance. And this was the book that I picked out, and it was seriously so stinking good, you guys. So I personally love a Pride and Prejudice retelling. I did not know that this book had aspects of that, but thankfully I did get this book from Uppercase, and what they do is they put post-it notes throughout the book telling you to go onto their site and enter the code word that's on the post-it note and get a little extra from the book. So the very first one was a kind of interview with the author. She told us 5 facts about the book. 5 like interesting little facts, tidbits about the creation of this book, and she said that she absolutely loves Jane Austen, and so does our main character, and so she used Pride and Prejudice and other Austen books as an inspiration for this book, and I could not wait to start reading this once I knew that, because I have loved every Pride and Prejudice retelling that I have ever read. I haven't read the original yet, which is just nuts, so I cannot wait to do that this year. It is one of my goals for the year, but this book did not disappoint. This was such a slow burn romance. We also had like the side crush going on. So no matter what, there was always some aspect of romance happening throughout the book, and it was just so very well done. I loved it. It killed me. It had me laughing. It had me smiling. It had me crying. This book was just so stinking good, and I absolutely love this beautiful embossed cover that we have. It goes all the way around the book. It's just amazing. I was a little worried in the beginning about this book because I have seen some of my other booktubers who I follow read a different Emma Mills book and they did not enjoy it and ended up DNFing it. So I was a little concerned, but this book was really, really good. I don't know if her other books are necessarily for me. I don't know if they would be of my taste, but her writing is really good, so I would definitely give another one of hers a chance. I just don't know if I would give the ones that are currently out 5 stars like I would this one. Next up was my book club pick, and that is The Jewel by Amy Ewing. To be totally honest with you, and this was brought up in book club, I cannot tell you why I love this book so much. I can't tell you why it's a 5-star read, because I honestly don't know, because when you really think about it, like pretty much nothing happens in this book. Like, for it being how long it is, which is like 350 pages, really nothing happens in the book, but it is a very, very interesting world. I could not stop reading it. It's very dark and it is pretty scary. This is a YA futuristic dystopian, and it's something that could definitely end up happening in the future, so it was a little scary to read. The back of it says that it's The Selection Meets The Handmaid's Tale, and that is like the perfect description for this book, honestly. Basically what ends up happening is that the world is, or the city that this takes place into, is broken up into different caste systems. And each of the smaller sections of the city are broken up and given a name. So the richest royalty of the city, they live in what is called the Jewel. And unfortunately, the royals cannot have children of their own. They start testing people in the lower castes to see if they have a gene to be a surrogate, and if they do, they are taken from their home, they are trained, and then they are sold in an auction to royals and those who have enough money to buy them so that they can carry their babies. And that is terrifying. I will say that since it's a YA, I think Amy did a very good job on how they get impregnated. It's not what you think. Luckily, it is a medical procedure and not what one would automatically assume is how they get impregnated. So it's not that, but there's just so much darkness in this book, and it was so darn good. There is a romance that is pretty unexpected, and the ending is a giant cliffhanger. So if you decide to read this, definitely have book 2 on hand. I have yet to read book 2 just because I didn't want to bring up things in the book club discussion that happened in book 2 when we were supposed to be discussing book 1. That ended up happening because some of my book club members did read book 2, so I have already been spoiled for a couple of things in book 2, but the ending is just a giant cliffhanger, and it comes out of nowhere. I kind of had an idea of where it was going, but to the extent I was not expecting it to be that brutal. And what ends up happening in the very last sentence came out of nowhere. Like, I asked multiple people if there were any clues that that was what's going to happen, and nobody saw that coming. So I cannot wait to read book 2 and then book 3 to find out what ends up happening in the series. It is so darn good. Definitely pick this up if you have not. And my very last 5-star read is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban by J.K. Rowling. This one was so good, you guys. I know that I have given the 2 previous books 5 stars, but this one was a true 5-star. The more I think about it now, I feel like books 1 and 2 should technically get a 4-star. This was so good. It's so different from the movie. Not like crazy different. It's not like they like change plot points or anything, but we learn so much more from the books, and there are things that just weren't even included at all. And this is finally the book where it really starts to divert from the movies, and I just loved it. It was so darn good. I have already started Goblet of Fire. I'm so excited to finally be reading the series. I'm so mad at myself for not reading them before. I'm so mad for not reading them before the movies came out. These are fantastic. If you have not jumped on the train of reading the books, if you love the movies, definitely pick up the books. It is really, really good. Honestly, you could probably skip books 1 and 2 because they are very, very similar to the movies. Book 2 differs a little bit, but those movies were done very, very well. After that, these books get really long, so of course they had to take stuff out, but book 3 is really where you learn a whole bunch. It really does have some very differing things, and I absolutely loved it. Alright guys, that is all 13 books that I read in the month of March. I am honestly so impressed with myself because I never finished my TBR. I finally stinking did. I had almost all 4 and 5-star reads. It was amazing. It was my birthday. I'm now officially 27. What a freaking great month. If you guys enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button. If you love this video and want to see more, go ahead and hit the subscription button. And if you want to be notified as soon as my videos go live on YouTube, go ahead and hit the notification bell. I'll see you in my next one. Bye!